Hello everyone and welcome back to my WWF No Mercy Let's Play series. This is Be Better Gamer and this is part 6 of the European Championship path that I am trying to 100%. I'm at 46.8%. I am pretty much, halfway there. I am going to be doing my last path as a contender fighting the title, and I am fighting another repeat appearance with X-Pac. I'm going with his green and black outfit. I did a light heavyweight championship run as X-Pac, and I gave him his little red and black kind of DX attire, and this time I'm going with his standard green and black attire. Now X-Pac's one of those wrestlers, is very interesting. He's one of those wrestlers that as a kid, watching him from the 1-2-3 kid, and then his time in WCW as 6, and then when he came back in the WWF as X-Pac, and he had that really long stretch where he was a good guy, bad guy, he was DX, he was not DX, he was on his own, he was with Kane, he was with this person and that person. I never really kept him on my radar. I just kind of he was just always there. And I don't know why that is. He was definitely one of the, notable light heavyweights running around, but I never considered him to be part of that category. I didn't put him in the same class as, Rey Mysterio Jr. or Chris Jericho or, even Taka Michinoku or anything like that. I never considered him part of that, but as I got older and looking back at his body of work and realizing how accomplished he was as a wrestler in both companies, WCW and WWE, and briefly in Japan before he came over to WWE the first time as the 1-2-3 kid, I realized that he kind of flew under my radar in terms of someone who was really good in the ring, was a really great worker. I didn't like his face, I didn't like his personality, I didn't like his attitude. I never really liked the fact that, a part of me always believed that maybe he was getting over because he was part of the clique. But, you can't really say that, because early on when he was the 1-2-3 kid, he was getting himself over, and that was before he really established himself as this member of the clique. And, when they were tearing down the kayfabe walls, he had a lot of great matches, and even later on as X-Pac, he would get the X-Pac heat, and I just think that happens when you get tired of someone. All of a sudden you just boo him for no reason. I mean, that's what's happening with Chyna now. That's what happens with a lot of guys. That's what happened with Hogan. X-Pac never really went away. The only times he ever went away was when he had an injury or two, and I guess that's why I never really noticed him, because he was always there. So I just kind of, you're not special, you know what I mean? But as I got older, and especially now, looking back, watching the WWE Network, he's around. I've actually been watching his matches closely again and noticing, X-Pac wasn't that bad. I should have given him a lot more credit than I did when I got older. And with that being said, I am doing a European title run with him because X-Pac was very well accomplished. I mean, the dude held a lot of titles, a lot of championships in the WWE, and for a pretty long period of time. And just like Matt Hardy, who I did in my last European Championship mode, and here I am facing him as X-Pac, his run was pretty significant. Albeit a short one, but still, in terms of the European title, it doesn't matter if you had a short run, because that still meant you had a long run, because the title itself wasn't around for that long. And there I go, hitting the X Factor, putting him away. This is going to be a really short Let's Play video. I breeze through this, and that's mostly because I have to lose twice. It always makes the playthrough so much shorter when you have to lose, especially if you know how to lose. I've talked about this before. There's a lot of ways to make you lose really quickly in under 30 seconds or a minute. And here I go. I gotta win the first match, I gotta lose the next match, then win the third match, then lose the fourth match, and then win the rest. So it's gonna go by very fast. And since I did a X-Pac light heavyweight run already, I'm not going to talk about his year in review like I've been doing with a lot of the other wrestlers, talking about the, year of, from November 1999 to November 2000. Instead, I'm going to talk about his accomplishments as European champion. And there I go, going for the Frankensteiner or Hurricanrana pin, and right away getting it countered. Because if you don't know, when you're playing the computer on expert and you right away start going for those strong grapples, they're going to counter it. That's the easiest way to lose a match, especially when there's no DQ on and when there's no count out like this one. So yeah, get wrapped up by Christian, another, person I've played 2 runs with. I did a light heavyweight run with him and a European run with him. Check those out too. Those were pretty fun. So anyway, X-Pac. Alright, so he first won the title on an episode of Raw that aired on September 21st, 1998 by defeating D'Lo Brown. And oh, wait till we get to D'Lo Brown. He's going to make an appearance in these European videos. He held the title for 14 days, 2 weeks, before losing it back to D'Lo Brown on another episode of Raw, which aired on October 5th. And then he would regain the title 19 days later at Judgment Day in Your House on October 18th, 98. That was a pay-per-view. The In Your House pay-per-views, they were notable because originally they were In Your House, and then they would have a subtitle, and then it switched, and then it was like Judgment Day in Your House, or DX in Your House, or whatever. And then they just completely stopped calling them In Your House and then just start calling them their own, named pay-per-views like we get today, like Fastlane or something like that. Kind of wish, imagine if they called Fastlane In Your House, like they never got out of that. They just kept calling them In Your Houses, like we get it in the pay-per-views. But you can watch that match on the WWE Network. And what's really funny about that, and I have to, I gotta watch some more of D'Lo Brown's videos, but so D'Lo Brown won the belt on October 5th, and then 2 weeks later, he's at the pay-per-view, and he's fighting X-Pac, and he's billed from Milan, Italy, which I think is hysterical, because he's the European champion, I guess, and then his tights say European champion, one side of it says European and the other side of it says champion in big bold letters. And I thought that was so cool. This man went out there, bought tights that said I'm the European champion. I want to see a wrestler do that these days. They win a title and then all of a sudden their tights say that they're the world champion. It's kind of like Stone Cold. Stone Cold used to come out with the vests, and the vests would say something different, and they usually would be significant to what was going on at the time. So I thought that was kind of hysterical, and I gotta go back and see if that started when he first became, the European champion. He was rocking those tights, and then he just wore them again when he became, he kept them, he saved them. He's like, I'm gonna keep these tights because I might be the European champion again. And he actually was, I think he's tied for the most reigns as European champion. But anyway, so X-Pac wins it, and he holds the title for 120 days. Before losing it to Shane McMahon on an episode of Raw on February 15th, 1999. And actually, that one was a little tricky because it was a tag team match with Shane McMahon and Kane against Triple H and X-Pac. And this was during the whole Corporation versus DX angle, which actually WrestleMania 2000 is kind of based around. They have the corporate ministry and DX in there. And then No Mercy has, they still have DX, but it's really about the McMahon Helmsley era. That's kind of when the No Mercy plotline revolves around. But Shane defeated X-Pac in a tag match, but the European title was on the line, and I guess whoever won the match, whoever got the pinfall would be the European champion. So Shane won. So that made X-Pac, after 2 reigns, that made him tied for 5th place with most total combined days, just putting him a little bit over Matt Hardy. Not too much, but he's tied with Eddie Guerrero. And he's tied for 3rd for longest individual reign, so after Matt Hardy, which I talked about in my last video. And he's tied with Triple H. So there you go, another sort of lengthy run. He definitely got more little pay-per-view love than Matt Hardy did. I talked about Matt Hardy in my last video about how Matt Hardy didn't get a lot of pay-per-view love, which was a big deal back then, which is why I bring it up. Back then, the pay-per-views, meant, significant exposure because they were supposed to mean something. They were big deals. And, to not be featured on the pay-per-view, in my opinion, it kind of meant that, like, they weren't giving this guy, like, a big moment. If they didn't put someone on a pay-per-view, like, they usually reserve the pay-per-views for, like, the top-tier guys, or at least the top featured acts or whatever, and to not have a champion in the company not be represented on the pay-per-view, I thought that was messed up, especially when Jeff Hardy's defending, quote-unquote, the lesser titles, if you want to call them that, and you're not. So it just goes into the whole convoluted mess of why the European title was created and how for such a long time it was in limbo and they didn't know what to do with it, especially when there was a champion. But X-Pac got more love because when he was the European champion, he was actually a babyface. DX were good guys. They were feuding with the corporation, and The Rock had just recently joined the corporation, so you had Triple H and the DX feuding with the corporation and trying to stop Vince McMahon on his power-hungry trip. So right away, Survivor Series 98 rolls around right after X-Pac wins the European Championship, and actually this was the first Survivor Series, I believe, to not have the standard Survivor Series matches, and it was for the longest time the Survivor Series was always the 4-on-4 or the 5-on-5. And this one was actually a tournament to decide, the vacant WWF champion. So X-Pac took on William Regal, who was Steven Regal at the time, which is interesting because, we'll get to Steven Regal later in the European. We'll talk about him some more later on. And they fought, and there was like a double count out, no big deal. X-Pac was out of the tournament. The next pay-per-view was Capital Carnage, which took place in London, England. And remember when I talked about way back, the European title was created sort of as a belt for when the WWF toured in Europe. And there was a tournament in Germany about it, and British Bulldog won it, and it was a big deal because, he's from Europe. And so Capital Carnage, European champion is X-Pac. He goes into it and he actually takes on The Rock. And, The Rock is the world champion. So The Rock puts the world championship title on the line, but X-Pac doesn't put his European title on the line. It would have been kind of cool to see, like, a unification of the titles. And actually, in retrospect, hindsight's 2020. I mean, I think it would have been a lot better if they just unified the titles that way. If the world title absorbed the European title in England, but obviously, they probably thought they had big plans for the European title down the line. And it was a great title to keep on X-Pac at the moment because it gave him a lot of momentum. But what was interesting about this match, and I obviously didn't realize it back then. I'm only realizing it now. So X-Pac started wrestling when he was very, very young. When he came into the WWF, he was only in his early 20s. At this pay-per-view, this is December 6th, 1998. The Rock is the world champion. X-Pac is the European champion. They're performing in front of a sold-out crowd in London, England. Second to last match. They're both 26 years old. Right? Just let that settle in. They're 26 years old. And already X-Pac has gone, through. He was the 1-2-3 kid. He was 6. Was part of the NWO. Now he's part of DX. And he's only 26. And The Rock is the world champion. It's nuts to think about that. I'm 28. I haven't been the world champion yet. I'm still working on that. Let alone any world title or lesser title. And what's also kind of significant about that match is it brings to light, at least for me, another world heavyweight championship match that I feel like in the past recent years people have been bringing up again. And for the longest time, no one really talked about it. But now, because we got YouTube, we got the WWE Network, we got all this stuff, people have been able to go back and look at matches with, sort of a new lens and say, wow, this match was really good. Why don't we talk about this match ever? And that match is when 123 Kid took on Bret Hart on an episode of Raw back in July 11th, 1994. And see, this is why I love the WWE Network, because they have matches like these. So if you have the WWE Network, which again, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're watching this video, obviously you're some sort of wrestling fan. So, and I believe any sort of wrestling fans should just get the WWE Network. And go to the WWE Network, go to their terrible search engine. As much as I love the WWE Network, I hate their search engine. There's a lot of things I don't like about the network, but it gets the job done, but they could do a lot better. And that search engine, oh my goodness. I think I'm going to do a Let's Play video talking about just the search engine alone, of how they can fix it and all the other things they can fix, hopefully within the next year or so for the WWE Network. So, real quick, Big Boss Man gets the pinfall here. Isn't that crazy? I was really surprised that he got the pinfall, completely taking advantage of his special. Really took me off guard. I don't know, I just thought that was funny. The computer was actually, pulling their own weight, and he won it. But anyway, so just put in the search bar 123 Kid, Bret Hart, and it should be the first thing that pops up. It was an episode of Raw, and Bret Hart took on the 123 Kid, and Bret Hart was the World Heavyweight Champion. And what a match. They had a fantastic match. Oh, okay, real quick too, before I talk about this. So this is a hardcore handicap match, and I'm supposed to use a weapon 5 times on Rikishi, or 10 times or whatever. And I didn't read it when I was doing it, so I think I lose this one because I wasn't paying attention. So I think this is the run. I know I did it with someone that I wasn't paying attention, and I ended up losing, and I had to do it again because I beat them, and then it's like, you lose, and I'm like, why did I lose? It's like, oh, because I didn't hit him a bunch of times with a weapon. So you're gonna see me do that here. So Bret Hart and 123 Kid, they go about 20 minutes on an episode of Raw, just randomly, and it's 2 baby faces. 123 Kid has a whole underdog gimmick. There's no really talk. There's no promos. The story is kind of told by JR and Macho Man, how Bret Hart is the fighting champion. He takes on all comers. 123 Kid, this is one of the biggest opportunities of his early career. You got Owen Hart coming out in the beginning, talking smack, trying to, play mind games with Bret Hart, because they were in a feud, and they go on for I would say about 6 minutes or so, and Bret Hart goes for a pinfall pretty close to the ropes, and 123 Kid puts his foot on the ropes, but the ref doesn't see it. Earl Hebner counts it, calls the match. The match is over. Bret Hart's music goes on, and then Bret Hart's like, no, his foot was on the ropes, man. His foot was on the ropes, and he's refusing to have his hand raised, and he's like, that's not fair. Let the kid, come on, let the match keep going. The kid was giving me a good effort. I don't want to beat him like that. And you could see the audience he's sitting up a bit. They were already into the match because they loved Bret Hart and 123 Kid. But they reacted so strongly to that, and it got so intense after that. There was so many good near falls. The pacing, you might kind of call it slow to today's standards, but I just think that's because people move so much faster these days. But it's about the storytelling. It's about the selling, and they were putting on such a great story about this underdog going toe-to-toe with the champion, the fighting champion, and oh my goodness, watch that match. Still holds up. And, it was one of the few moments we got to see a glimpse as to, 123 Kid, X-Pac, 6, whatever you want to call him, hanging with the, in the World Heavyweight title picture. Bret Hart himself he was one of the first smaller champions. And I'm glad that we've come a long way, but there's still a lot to be changed. But I'm glad that these days you can have, quote unquote smaller guys, even though I don't consider someone who's 6'1", small, but they were small back then because your normal champions were like, your Hulk Hogan's and your Ultimate Warriors, like these huge jacked up guys. Like even Macho Man, when he was the world champion, he was considered different and smaller, and dude was like 6'2", 6'4", or whatever. I wouldn't go up to Macho Man and say, hey, you're a small champion. He kicked my butt. But yeah, it was just a fantastic match. 2 different styles. It was great. Go watch it. And seeing that when I was doing research for this and seeing that The Rock and X-Pac had this world championship match, it was really cool. Watch that match and then watch The Rock against X-Pac, and you'll see the difference between a champion who was ready to be champion like Bret Hart and who kind of was still green, because the match wasn't as exciting. And you could definitely see X-Pac had the more experience in the match, which was interesting. I mean, The Rock would definitely, within a few years, become one of the top stars in the company, but he definitely kind of was given that title a little bit earlier. He was definitely over as a personality and as a character, but as a performer in the ring, it took The Rock a few more years before he could put on those great classic matches. Or at least, work, great matches with everyone. Bret Hart was a wizard at that. These days, The Rock, he's a pro. When he came back and did those, few stints, he was better than he had ever been, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, 26 years old, it was crazy. It just blew my mind. And then to think he had that great match with Bret Hart, a few years earlier, he was 22. 22 years blows my mind. These kids are so young. So yeah, just go watch those matches. I wanna, with these Let's Plays, I wanna recommend these great matches that I come across when I'm doing research for these things, because I myself forget about them. And it's great to talk about those matches. A great match doesn't stop being a great match. And sometimes, great matches are like, a fine wine. They age better over the years because you start to appreciate some of those things a little bit more. Even like the crowds, like some of the old matches are great because the crowds, you just don't get those crowds anymore, or the interactions with the crowds anymore. Stone Cold fighting Stone Cold right now with X-Pac, perfect example. Like his energy in the ring and how the fans reacted to that. Like you don't really see that anymore. You don't see that intensity from the fans, in relation to their character. And I think it's because Stone Cold himself was such an intense person that brought that out of the audience. And even before, you look at the 80s, people went nuts in the 80s in the rings. I mean, they wanted to kill the bad guys. Ric Flair, they hated him. And then Dusty Rhodes would come out and they would lose their, mind over Dusty Rhodes because he was the working man. He would go crazy in the ring on Ric Flair, and the guys, they'll be bleeding in the ring, and it was nuts and losing it. I was watching Fastlane, and I felt like half the audience was asleep. And it's not like the guys weren't doing good in the ring; they were busting their ass off. Yeah, okay, they weren't the most best matches ever, and I don't think they should be the best matches ever because save that for WrestleMania, but. That Daniel Bryan Roman Reigns match was great. It was like Daniel Bryan was, Bryan Danielson all over again from Ring of Honor, and then Roman Reigns is bringing out this ferocity that we've never seen, or we haven't seen in a while, and he's just elbowing the crap out of Daniel Bryan. And Daniel Bryan's kicking the crap out of them, and they're tearing into each other, and there's fans in the ring just sitting there, like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like fans in the front row not doing anything. They used to watch go back and watch like Attitude Era or even anything before that. Any fans in the camera side, they were losing it all the time. They were losing it. And I don't know, these days fans don't do that. I'm a little too late here going for the I was gonna go for the whatchamacallit, X Factor. Oh, is this the match where I had to restart? Yeah. I think I was supposed to put him through a table, right? No. What was that? I know in one of these matches I was supposed to put someone through the table, and I guess I didn't in this one, but I don't think it costs me the match. I know there was a match I had to put someone through the table. He countered it and he put me through the table, and I was like, ugh. Yeah, oh wait, this was the match. Yeah, I was supposed to put him through the table. I didn't read it before when I was talking. I was supposed to put him through the table. Wow, I restarted a match and I still keep this run under 40 minutes. Wow, that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I'm supposed to put Austin through the table, and I didn't want to just do it. You know, I gotta be fancy with it. I gotta do the X Factor through the table. That's the only way to do it. Whenever they give you those table options of, like, you know, win by putting your opponent through the table, I always try to do a special move. It would have been cool to see, you know, the game progress later on where you could do a move onto the table without actually standing on the table, like a powerbomb onto the table. I guess that's kind of cool about the newer games. You could kind of do that. But yeah, it would have been cool to see it with this engine. I just think the newer games should just have this engine. But yeah, anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah, the fans. Oh yeah, the fans. I mean, you know, look at these other matches that X-Pac was in. So X-Pac, Royal Rumble 99, X-Pac takes on Gangrel, right? And go back and watch that match. The crowd is into it, okay? X-Pac, Gangrel. I mean, it doesn't scream anything out to you on paper, but the fans were into that match. There was just something about fan reaction that has just kind of been lost, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the newer generation. You know, maybe it's just, I don't know. I don't know really what it is. I feel like when you go to a wrestling event, you should be screaming at the top of your lungs and cheering for your favorites and booing the guys you don't like. I also think nowadays people have smartened up a little too much, and you see fans trying to be the center of attention. You see that in NXT a lot. You know, they like, I love NXT, the product, but some of those fans just piss me off because they chant stupid stuff, and you could tell they're just trying to do it to be smart or to be funny or to be cool. You know, chanting all these like indie things and stuff like that, and it's like, shut up and just watch the match. You know, chant the match kind of how like the match is supposed to be chanted. You know, cheer the good guy, boo the bad guy. I know it's kayfabe, I know it's fake, blah blah blah, whatever you want to call it. But you know what? I'm gonna cheer for my favorite. I'm gonna boo for the guy I don't like. I'm not gonna be chanting, you know, stupid silly chants so that people could laugh at me. You know, people didn't come to pay to see me. And I feel like a lot of fans do that. Like, oh, look at me. I'm someone who goes on the internet and you know, I know all the secret stuff. Look, I'm going to chant click. It's like, no, you're not smart. Everyone knows that. You're not the only one, you know? You know, sometimes chants are clever and funny, but, you know, it's when someone's doing it in unison, but only if it pertains to the match. Like, you know, the CM Punk chants out of nowhere, you know, are just kind of annoying. It's like, we get it. We all miss CM Punk. I mean, it's funny when you do it, when you chant it at Triple H, but when it's like a random Divas match or a random, you know, what match did I see? I saw it in some match that made no sense, and people were just chanting CM Punk. It's like, come on, guys, don't disrespect the wrestlers in the ring like that. They have nothing to do with the CM Punk situation, you know. X-Pac Heat is a perfect example. I mean, I mentioned it earlier on. People were just booing X-Pac just for the sake of. But you know what? It worked. It worked because it's like they wanted to see him lose so bad. They weren't chanting, you know, X-Pac sucks because, you know, they were cool. It's like they genuinely believed X-Pac sucked. And they wanted to see him lose. And then he would win and it would piss you off. You know? You wanted to see Kane get his revenge on him and all that stuff. Oh, man. Anyway, speaking of Kane, St. Valentine's Day Massacre in your house, February 14th on Valentine's Day, 1999. Corporation, Kane, and Chyna defeated DX, Triple H, and X-Pac. And this is during the whole, I believe right after this, Chyna betrayed, or was it before this? No, yeah, okay, it was before this. After the Royal Rumble. So the Royal Rumble 99 was the first time Chyna was in the Royal Rumble, and that was a big deal because it was like the first time a female entered the Royal Rumble, and I think she was number 30. There was like a qualifying match for it and everything. So the next day, she turns on Triple H. And at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Kane and Chyna, now with the corporation, they take on DX, Triple H, and X-Pac. After this, X-Pac starts getting in his feud with Shane McMahon, and they have the WrestleMania 15 match for the European title, and that's when Shane McMahon he wins the title the day after St. Valentine's Day Massacre, because he wins it on February 15th. So he wins it on the Raw after that match, because I believe he interferes during this tag match, and that's how Kane and Chyna loses. So Shane McMahon interferes. Flash forward to WrestleMania 15, they have the rematch, and Triple H turns on X-Pac, and he joins the corporation. So there was a lot of corporation DX backstabbing going on, because then down the line Triple H would leave the corporation again. It was too much backstabbing, and in my opinion, too many people turning on each other. Now one person's good, now one person's bad. But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is that, so yeah, that's X-Pac's, European Championship run. It was pretty decent, definitely a lot more pay-per-view love, but X-Pac was so over. Chyna was so over. And go listen to the Stone Cold podcast. He has a podcast from the Podcast One network, or if you have the WWE network, you can watch it, where he interviews Triple H. Now, he did a live podcast with Vince McMahon earlier that was on the WWE network, and then he did one recently with Triple H, and he replays them on his own podcast that you could just listen to the audio of. I just recommend listening to Stone Cold's podcast anyway, and Stone Cold had a great conversation with X-Pac that I think I touched on a little bit when I did X-Pac's Light Heavyweight Championship run, but in that interview with X-Pac, Chyna's brought up a little, and X-Pac's relationship with Chyna. Obviously, he had an intimate relationship with Chyna after Triple H did, and it was a relationship that apparently was surrounded with a lot of abuse and drugs, and they both were making a lot of bad decisions, a lot of bad mistakes. X-Pac apparently these days is clean. Chyna, no one really knows. I mean, obviously she's doing all the adult films and stuff like that, but there's videos that keep getting leaked, and stories of her passing out because she's drunk and all this stuff. But in the Stone Cold podcast, Triple H was asked about Chyna being in the Hall of Fame. Stone Cold does talk about Chyna. Will she be in the Hall of Fame? And Triple H made a comment. He said that, she was a pioneer. She definitely did a lot. Had a big impact on the business, being a woman, female wrestler, and the storylines they did with DX and all that stuff. And she was so over. She made a lot of money in the company. But then he says, my daughter can Google Chyna today, and, he was alluding to all the porn basically coming up. And I thought that was kind of funny, not funny, but kind of hypocritical. Because if you Google 80% of the Hall of Fame wrestlers, you'll see some crazy stuff come up. X-Pac's not in the Hall of Fame. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in it, along with all the other members of DX. But, Google Macho Man. Google all the stuff Macho Man did. And I love Macho Man as a wrestler. He was one of my favorite wrestlers. But I'm not going to deny the fact that Macho Man was very abusive to his real-life wife, Miss Elizabeth, and would lock her in a hotel room because he was afraid of, guys hitting on her. And everyone knew he was very jealous and intense and just not a great husband a lot of the times. And the stuff he did with Miss Elizabeth, or all the other rumors floating around about Macho Man. I mean, you can Google that. You can Google Ultimate Warrior's racist remarks that he made just a few years ago, or all the stuff he's done. I mean, you can Google so many things about these guys. Very few wrestlers have led picture perfect lives. And to say that about Chyna, it was very interesting, because it's like, is that where we draw the line? So apparently with Chris Benoit, we draw the line with murder, obviously, even though there are some other wrestlers who have committed murder. And we draw the line with porn. It's very interesting, considering if you look back at the Attitude Era, that's what they were going for. They were going for being just short of like adult entertainment with all the sexuality and all the things they were doing and the accidental nipple slips and nudity. So I think there's a lot more there, and we'll never find out the real story, but that's just another piece of the puzzle that we'll never find out. But I think it's something more that I would like to discuss. I'll probably do a IC title run with Chyna, and we'll talk about that. But I'm wrapping up this X-Pac one. I hope you enjoyed it. It's pretty short, very quick, but X-Pac is kind of a beast in the game. And I guess I could talk more about that in another run. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this European Championship. I have so much more I want to talk about, so keep watching, keep subscribing, comments, likes, all that jazz. Keep watching wrestling, get the WWE Network, and I will see you next time.